I used to love the quiet of our home after everyone went to bed, the kind of silence that wrapped around you like a soft blanket. Familiar, safe, ordinary. The sound of the clock ticking in the living room, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint rustle of leaves outside our window. For years, that was my comfort. It meant another day was done, and my family was safe under the same roof. But lately, that quiet felt different. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick, like the house was holding its breath, like someone or something was waiting. Every night followed the same routine: dinner at 7, dishes by 8, a quick talk about Lily's school or Daniel's work, then bed by 9. We were an ordinary family with ordinary habits, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. When I lay beside Daniel, I could always feel the warmth of his arm brushing mine, the steady rhythm of his breathing. But recently, something changed. His breathing felt forced, too even, too controlled. As if he was pretending to sleep, he would kiss my forehead and whisper softly, "Good night, sweetheart." Then he would wait. I could feel it, that stillness in his body, that tension in the air. The moment my breathing slowed, he'd shift his weight carefully, slow enough not to wake me. The mattress would dip, then rise as he slipped out of bed. The first time it happened, I thought I was dreaming. The second time, I told myself he probably went for water or checked the locks. But when I started noticing it every single night, doubt began to coil in my chest like a snake. One night, I kept my eyes barely open, pretending to drift off. The lamp cast a faint orange glow across the room. I watched as Daniel turned to make sure I was still. His face looked different, not loving or calm, but cautious, guilty even. Then he stood, reached for his robe, and tiptoed toward the door. My heart pounded in my throat. I wanted to sit up, to ask him what he was doing, but something told me not to. Something about the way he moved, slow, deliberate, made me feel like I wasn't supposed to know. The door opened with the faintest creak. I heard the soft pad of his footsteps down the hall. And then, another sound, a whisper, high-pitched, gentle, my daughter's voice. I froze. Lily? It was almost midnight. I strained to listen, but their voices were too soft, too careful. I only caught fragments. A faint giggle, a whisper of cloth, the low murmur of Daniel saying something I couldn't make out. Then the front door clicked. They were leaving. For a long moment, I stayed perfectly still, staring into the dark ceiling. Every sound in the house disappeared except the pounding in my ears. My husband and daughter were sneaking out at night. Together. And they only moved once they thought I was asleep. I didn't know what terrified me more. The thought that they were hiding something from me, or the fear that deep down, I already knew what it was. The next morning, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. The sunlight that filled our kitchen seemed too bright, too sharp, like it was trying to expose something I wasn't meant to see. I stood at the counter stirring my coffee, watching Daniel and Lily go through their usual motions, or what looked like their usual motions. Daniel scrolled through his phone, humming a tune that didn't sound familiar. Lily picked at her toast, glancing at me and quickly looking away. "Sleep okay?" Daniel asked without lifting his eyes. "Yeah," I said softly. "You?" "Like a rock," he replied. He even smiled, that same calm, reliable smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. But now it looked rehearsed, a lie wrapped in kindness. Lily giggled at something on her tablet, but when she noticed I was watching her, she quickly lowered her head. Her hands fidgeted. She looked nervous. My daughter, who never hid anything from me, not even bad grades, was avoiding my eyes. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking. But the feeling didn't fade. It grew, spreading through me like fog I couldn't escape. The rest of the day passed in slow motion. Every sound in the house seemed louder. Every little movement from Daniel or Lily made my stomach twist. They exchanged quiet glances I couldn't read. Sometimes Daniel would look at his watch, and Lily would follow with the same motion, as if counting down to something. When night came, my heart was already racing. I went through the motions, brushing my teeth, folding my robe, turning off the lamp, but my mind was sharp, awake. Daniel slid into bed beside me, turning away, his breathing too calm, too controlled. "You'll sleep better in the dark," he said when I asked him to keep the light on. The words landed like a warning, so I lay there, eyes closed, waiting. Minutes passed, then hours, The streetlight outside cast thin stripes across the wall. I counted them. I listened to the clock tick in the hallway. I waited until Daniel's breathing evened out again, perfectly steady, like an actor playing sleep. And then, the shift. The bed dipped slightly. I heard the faint rustle of fabric, then the soft thud of his feet on the floor. I opened my eyes just a crack. The moonlight caught the outline of his body as he slipped into his robe. He glanced at me just long enough to make sure I hadn't moved. My pulse quickened so hard it hurt. Then I heard it. The whisper. "Lily, you ready?" My heart jumped into my throat. He wasn't whispering to himself. He was whispering to our daughter. A moment later, the hallway floor creaked. Lily's bedroom door opened. I saw her shadow, small, light-footed. Stepping into the dim light, she was wearing her coat over her pajamas, clutching something in her hands. Daniel leaned down, said something I couldn't catch, and then she laughed. A soft, careful giggle that made my skin crawl. The sound of the front door unlocking cut through the air. I heard them step out, 2 sets of feet, one heavier, one lighter. Then the click of the latch, silence again. They were gone. I sat up, frozen, the blanket twisted around my legs. I wanted to run after them, to scream Daniel's name, but something deep inside me said, don't. There was something deliberate in the way they moved, something practiced, and it terrified me. I waited 5 minutes, 10. The house was still. I stepped out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold floorboards. The air was sharp and biting, as if even the house disapproved of what I was about to do. The living room was dark except for the glow from the street outside. On the counter, crumbs, a cupcake wrapper, a napkin folded neatly, a red heart drawn on it in marker, Lily's handwriting. The faint scent of vanilla and sugar hung in the air. I touched the napkin like it might explain itself. But it didn't. Nothing did. They came home an hour later. The lock clicked softly, footsteps, whispering. I rushed back to bed, lying perfectly still, pretending to breathe slow and deep. The door creaked open. Daniel's shadow crossed the room. I felt his cold hand brush my arm as he whispered, still asleep. Then Lily giggled again, just like before, and in that sound, her innocent, secretive little laugh, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. A lie. The next morning, Daniel was brighter than the sun, whistling, smiling, overdoing everything. He poured me coffee, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You seemed to sleep well last night. Didn't move an inch." I stirred my tea slowly, watching his reflection in the window. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I'm getting used to the dark." He smiled, but I caught it this time, the flicker in his eyes, the guilt behind the grin. That's when I made my choice. I wasn't going to sleep again, not until I knew the truth, not until I understood why my husband and daughter waited every night for me to close my eyes. The next night came faster than I expected. I spent the entire day acting normal, or at least pretending to. I smiled when Daniel made his jokes. I nodded when Lily talked about her friends, but inside, I was all nerves and sharp edges. Every clock tick pulled me closer to the moment I dreaded and needed at once. By dinner, my stomach was in knots. Daniel talked about work, about how the new manager was impossible. Lily chimed in about a school project. It all sounded so ordinary, so painfully normal, that I began to wonder if I was the problem, if my exhaustion and loneliness had created ghosts where there were none. But then I caught the way Daniel's hand brushed Lily's arm when he stood to clear the dishes, the way they shared a look, quick, secretive, enough to kill every doubt I had left. I washed the plates slowly, watching them whisper by the kitchen doorway. Their voices were soft, barely there, but their tone, the rhythm, was too familiar. That tone people use when they plan something they don't want you to know about. I dropped the dishcloth in the sink and pretended not to notice. I needed them to believe I was clueless. When night finally came, I followed every motion of our routine carefully, almost ritualistically. Pajamas, teeth, lamp, blanket, breath, my body played the part of the sleeping wife so well that even I began to believe it. But inside I was wide awake, my senses sharpened, my thoughts slow and cold. The moonlight stretched across the floor in a thin silver line, cutting through the dark. I kept my eyes half open, my breathing even. The rhythm just like before. I waited. For a long while, nothing happened. Then, the whisper of fabric, the familiar creak of the mattress. Daniel moved carefully, like a thief in his own home. He stood, checked my face, lingered just long enough to make sure I was gone to the world. Then came the faint whisper again, low and deliberate. Lily? It's time. My breath caught in my throat. I could barely hear her answer, just a muffled sound of slippers on the floor. She was ready. My heart pounded so hard I feared it would wake them. I stayed completely still, my palms sweating under the blanket. The two of them moved together like they'd done this dozens of times before. The rhythm of their footsteps matched. Careful, quiet, synchronized. I heard the faint jingle of keys, the squeak of the front door hinges. The soft, icy air drifted into the hallway, carrying with it the faint scent of vanilla again, the same scent from the cupcake wrapper. I counted to 30 after the door closed, then I got up. The night air hit me like water. The house felt empty, hollow. Even the shadows seemed to have vanished. I slipped my robe on and crept to the living room. The crumbs were gone now. The counter was spotless. Daniel had wiped away every trace before they left. But he'd missed one thing, a paper bag sitting by the door. I crouched down, opening it with trembling hands. Inside were small boxes, a candle, 2 chocolate cupcakes, a folded note with Lily's handwriting again. For her. My fingers went numb. I didn't know who her was. My mind raced. A woman? Someone from Daniel's past? A secret friend of Lily's? None of it made sense. All I knew was that whatever they were doing it together, and I wasn't supposed to know. I stepped closer to the window. Outside, the road was empty, stretching into the night. The church's bell tower stood faintly in the distance, catching the moonlight. It was barely visible, but I saw them. 2 figures, small, side by side, walking down the street. The sight made my knees weak. For a moment, I thought about calling out to them, screaming their names, but the sound stuck in my throat. I just stood there, frozen, watching them disappear into the darkness. They moved slowly, like they had a purpose, a destination I couldn't see, and when they vanished around the corner, I felt something inside me snap. I wasn't imagining it anymore. They were hiding something so big that they thought I couldn't handle it. I stood by the window for hours, waiting for them to come back. When they finally did, it was nearly 2 a.m. Daniel's arm was around Lily's shoulders. They were both quiet, but calm, like they'd been somewhere that gave them peace. He locked the door behind them and whispered, "Go to bed, sweetheart." Lily nodded, her face pale under the porch light. She went straight to her room. Daniel paused in the hallway, looking toward our bedroom. I slipped back into bed just before he entered. He stood over me for a long moment, too long, before climbing in. His body was cold, the faint smell of wax clinging to his clothes. He wrapped an arm around me like nothing had happened. But this time, I didn't pretend to sleep. I lay awake until the sun came up, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the courage to find out where they were going. The next night, I promised myself I would follow them. Section 2. Suspicion grows. The next morning, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. The sunlight that filled our kitchen seemed too bright, too sharp, like it was trying to expose something I wasn't meant to see. I stood at the counter stirring my coffee, watching Daniel and Lily go through their usual motions, or what looked like their usual motions. Daniel scrolled through his phone, humming a tune that didn't sound familiar. Lily picked at her toast, glancing at me and quickly looking away. "Sleep okay?" Daniel asked without lifting his eyes. "Yeah," I said softly. "You?" "Like a rock," he replied. He even smiled, that same calm, reliable smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. But now it looked rehearsed. A lie, wrapped in kindness. Lily giggled at something on her tablet, but when she noticed I was watching her, she quickly lowered her head. Her hands fidgeted. She looked nervous. My daughter, who never hid anything from me, not even bad grades, was avoiding my eyes. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking. But the feeling didn't fade. It grew, spreading through me like fog I couldn't escape. The rest of the day passed in slow motion. Every sound in the house seemed louder. Every little movement from Daniel or Lily made my stomach twist. They exchanged quiet glances I couldn't read. Sometimes Daniel would look at his watch, and Lily would follow with the same motion, as if counting down to something. When night came, my heart was already racing. I went through the motions, brushing my teeth, folding my robe, turning off the lamp. But my mind was sharp, awake. Daniel slid into bed beside me, turning away, his breathing too calm, too controlled. "You'll sleep better in the dark," he said when I asked him to keep the light on. The words landed like a warning. So I lay there, eyes closed, waiting. Minutes passed, then hours. The streetlight outside cast thin stripes across the wall. I counted them. I listened to the clock tick in the hallway. I waited until Daniel's breathing evened out again, perfectly steady, like an actor playing sleep. And then, the shift. The bed dipped slightly. I heard the faint rustle of fabric, then the soft thud of his feet on the floor. I opened my eyes just a crack. The moonlight caught the outline of his body as he slipped into his robe. He glanced at me, just long enough to make sure I hadn't moved. My pulse quickened so hard it hurt. Then I heard it. The whisper. "Lily? You ready?" My heart jumped into my throat. He wasn't whispering to himself. He was whispering to our daughter. A moment later, the hallway floor creaked. Lily's bedroom door opened. I saw her shadow, small, light-footed, stepping into the dim light. She was wearing her coat over her pajamas, clutching something in her hands. Daniel leaned down, said something I couldn't catch, and then she laughed. A soft, careful giggle that made my skin crawl. The sound of the front door unlocking cut through the air. I heard them step out. 2 sets of feet, one heavier, one lighter. Then the click of the latch, silence again. They were gone. I sat up, frozen, the blanket twisted around my legs. I wanted to run after them, to scream Daniel's name, but something deep inside me said, "Don't." There was something deliberate in the way they moved, something practiced, and it terrified me. I waited 5 minutes, 10. The house was still. I stepped out of bed, my bare feet touching the cold floorboards. The air was sharp and biting, as if even the house disapproved of what I was about to do. The living room was dark except for the glow from the street outside. On the counter, crumbs, a cupcake wrapper, a napkin folded neatly, a red heart drawn on it. In marker, Lily's handwriting. The faint scent of vanilla and sugar hung in the air. I touched the napkin like it might explain itself. But it didn't. Nothing did. They came home an hour later. The lock clicked softly, footsteps, whispering. I rushed back to bed, lying perfectly still, pretending to breathe slow and deep. The door creaked open. Daniel's shadow crossed the room. I felt his cold hand brush my arm as he whispered, still asleep. Then Lily giggled again, just like before, and in that sound, her innocent, secretive little laugh, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. A lie. The next morning, Daniel was brighter than the sun, whistling, smiling, overdoing everything. He poured me coffee, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You seemed to sleep well last night. Didn't move an inch." I stirred my tea slowly, watching his reflection in the window. "Yeah," I said. "I guess I'm getting used to the dark." He smiled, but I caught it this time, the flicker in his eyes, the guilt behind the grin. That's when I made my choice. I wasn't going to sleep again. Not until I knew the truth. Not until I understood why my husband and daughter waited every night for me to close my eyes. The day after that sleepless night dragged on endlessly, stretching into something that didn't feel real. Every movement in the house carried a weight I couldn't name. I caught myself staring at Daniel's hands while he buttered his toast, wondering where those hands had been at midnight. I watched Lily as she braided her hair, noticed how she avoided my eyes when I said her name. I was living inside my own home like a stranger. When Daniel left for work, I stood at the window, watching his car pull out of the driveway. He waved, smiled, the same familiar smile, the one I used to trust without thinking. But now it looked like a mask, a perfectly practiced expression hiding something dark beneath. My fingers trembled as I closed the curtain. The rest of the day was filled with silence and noise all at once. Every creak of the floor made me jump. Every sound of the wind outside made my heart lurch. I started second-guessing everything I knew. The sound of their laughter, the warmth of their hugs, the simple things that had once meant safety. Were those all lies? Had I missed the signs for years? By noon, I had talked myself into a dozen different possibilities. Maybe Daniel was having an affair. Maybe he was sneaking out to meet someone, and he brought Lily along to keep me from suspecting. Or maybe there was something darker. I couldn't bear to finish the thought. I sat in the living room, staring at the paper bag still sitting near the door. I hadn't thrown it away. The candle inside it was short and pale, the wax slightly melted around the edges. The cupcakes were gone, but the napkin remained. Lily's small, curved handwriting, for her. Those two words haunted me like a whisper I couldn't escape. That evening, I tried to act normal. I cooked dinner, the smell of stew filling the kitchen, hoping the routine would calm my nerves, but my hands kept shaking. Daniel noticed. "You okay?" he asked, setting the table. His tone was too soft, too careful. "I'm fine," I said, smiling too wide. "Just tired." He studied me for a second longer than usual, then nodded. "Maybe you should sleep early tonight." That sentence, innocent, harmless, sent a chill through me. Sleep early. It was what he always said when he needed me out of the way. After dinner, I washed the dishes alone. Through the window, I saw Lily in the backyard talking on her phone in low whispers. When she noticed me looking, she hung up immediately and came inside, pretending to yawn. "Long day?" I asked. She nodded, keeping her eyes on the floor. "Yeah, I'm really tired." I didn't believe her, not for a second. That night, I changed my plan. Instead of waiting in bed, I would be ready. I put on dark clothes, soft shoes, and left the bedroom light on low. When Daniel came in, he frowned. "You're still up?" "Just reading," I said, holding a book I hadn't turned a page of. He hesitated at the doorway, studying me. For a moment, I thought he'd confess, that he'd say, "There's something you need to know." But he only said, "Don't stay up too late." Then he kissed my forehead and turned off the lamp. The darkness pressed against me. My pulse thudded loud in my ears. I waited. I counted the minutes, the breaths, the stillness. Then came the familiar sound, the sheet shifting, the floor creaking, his soft whisper through the crack of the door. "Lily, it's time." I felt the air leave my lungs. My heart raced, but my body stayed frozen. I heard Lily's door open again, her slippers sliding across the floor. The quiet murmur of their voices met in the hallway. I closed my eyes, forcing my breathing to stay steady. I listened to the faint sound of the lock turning, the door closing, and the silence that followed. Then I opened my eyes. The clock read 12:17 a.m. My fear turned into resolve. Whatever secret they were hiding, whatever truth they thought I couldn't bear, I was going to see it with my own eyes. I wrapped my scarf around my neck, waited 5 long minutes, and crept toward the door. But as I placed my hand on the handle, something inside me whispered, "Are you sure you want to know?" The answer came easily this time, yes, because the only thing worse than being lied to is never finding out why. The night air was cold and sharp, the kind of chill that bites through clothes and skin straight into your bones. I stood by the door, listening to the quiet. No car engines, no footsteps, just the whisper of wind brushing against the windows. My heart beat so loud, I was afraid it might give me away. I slipped outside and pulled my scarf tighter. The moon was full, washing the street in pale silver light. The air smelled faintly of rain and the neighbor's jasmine. Everything was still, except for the flicker of 2 shadows far ahead, Daniel and Lily. They were walking side by side, their figures moving slowly down the narrow road that led past the church. My breath caught in my throat. That path led nowhere but the old cemetery. I followed them. Every few steps I stopped to listen. The crunch of gravel under my feet sounded like thunder to my ears. I kept close to the fences and hedges, careful to stay hidden in the dark. They didn't speak much, just a few soft words between them, too faint for me to hear. Lily's hand swung beside Daniel's, small and trusting. It was such a painfully normal gesture that it almost made me turn back. Almost. When they turned onto the path leading behind the church, I felt a wave of dread roll through me. The last time I'd been there was years ago, for a funeral I tried to erase from memory. My throat tightened as I stepped onto the dirt road. Each crunch of gravel felt like stepping deeper into something I wasn't ready to face. They stopped near the back gate. Daniel took something out of his coat pocket. The glint of a small metal key. He unlocked the gate with slow, familiar ease. The hinges squealed, then went quiet as he guided it closed behind them. I crouched behind the hedges, heart hammering, holding my breath. Lily's voice carried through the night, soft and trembling. "Daddy, do you think she knows?" Daniel's voice followed, steady but low. "No, sweetheart, not yet. She's been sleeping. It's better this way." Those words burned into me. It's better this way. My hands trembled so violently that I had to press them against my chest. I wanted to step out to demand answers. But something, fear, instinct, pain, kept me rooted in place. I waited until they disappeared among the gravestones before pushing the gate open just enough to slip through. The hinges groaned softly and I froze, scanning for movement, nothing. Only the sound of wind brushing through the grass and the distant chirp of crickets. The cemetery stretched wide under the moonlight. The stones stood like silent witnesses, their names carved deep in the cold marble. I walked barefoot now, carrying my shoes, afraid the sound would betray me. Ahead, I saw flickers of orange, candlelight. Daniel and Lily were kneeling in front of a small grave. Daniel was lighting a candle while Lily placed something on the ground, a cupcake carefully wrapped. I stopped a few feet away, hidden behind a tree, and stared. The candlelight shimmered against the polished stone, revealing the name I'd tried so hard to forget, Emily Carter. The letters carved deep, weathered slightly with age. My body went numb. The world tilted. I felt like I was falling without moving an inch. Daniel's voice broke through the stillness. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "We brought your favorite again. Lily baked this time." His tone was light, almost playful, but his voice cracked on the last word. "She did such a good job, Em." Lily giggled. "Not really." "I forgot the sugar." Daniel laughed softly, his shoulders shaking. "You didn't forget. You just made it how she used to." And then I understood. Every late night, every secret whisper, every lie. They weren't sneaking off to betray me. They were coming here, to her, to our first daughter, the one we lost. The pain hit me like a flood. My knees gave out, and I clutched the cold bark of the tree to keep from collapsing. My throat burned with a cry I couldn't release. They had kept this from me, not out of malice, but mercy, because I had never been able to face this place again. Daniel brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face and whispered, "Your sister would be proud of you." Lily nodded, tears glinting in the candlelight. "Do you think she knows we still come?" Daniel's voice broke. "She knows. She always knows." My hands trembled as I covered my mouth to stifle a sob. The wind rustled the trees around me, carrying the faint scent of wax and sugar. For years I had believed they were hiding something terrible from me, when in truth they were carrying the weight of my own silence. I stayed there, unseen, until they stood up to leave. Daniel blew out the candle, leaving only the faint glow of moonlight on the stone. Lily held his hand, and together they walked away. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, my heart heavier still. The world around me blurred, the edges of everything softened by tears. I stepped forward finally, my eyes on the grave that bore her name. I knelt, tracing the letters with trembling fingers, the cold stone biting against my skin. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." And for the first time in years, I let myself cry. Not the quiet tears I'd hidden in pillows or bathrooms, but deep, broken sobs that tore through the still night, the kind that comes from years of pretending not to hurt. When I finally looked up, the candle they'd left still smoked faintly. The air smelled like wax and loss and love. I knew then that I couldn't keep pretending anymore. When I went home that night, the sky was already pale with dawn. Daniel and Lily were asleep, their faces peaceful. I stood in the doorway and watched them, my chest full of something raw and aching. I wasn't angry anymore, just ready to stop being afraid of remembering. When I finally gathered the courage to return the next night, I told myself I wasn't going to hide this time. I wasn't going to sneak behind trees or pretend the past didn't exist. I needed to see where Daniel and Lily went, what they did, and I needed to face it. Not as the broken mother I used to be, but as the woman still living in the echo of what we lost. I left the house a few minutes after they did. The night was calm again, but different from before. The air had a strange stillness, as if it knew what was coming. The street lamps buzzed faintly, the kind of sound you only notice when you're alone. The world felt smaller, quieter, like it was folding itself around me. When I reached the church road, I saw their figures again. Daniel holding a lantern this time, Lily walking beside him, clutching something close to her chest. The light from the lantern flickered against the trees, casting their shadows tall and thin across the path. They didn't talk much, but every now and then Daniel's hand rested on Lily's shoulder, steady and gentle, and she leaned into him like she always did when she was little. I followed at a distance, my breath forming pale clouds in the air. The cemetery gate creaked softly as Daniel opened it, that same key glinting in his hand. They moved inside, their light bobbing between the gravestones like a small moving star. I stopped outside the fence this time. I wanted to see, without interrupting, to understand before I let them know I was there. I crouched low behind the stone wall and watched. The grass swayed in the wind. The smell of earth and wax filled the air. Daniel set the lantern down and knelt. Lily unpacked something from her arms. A small wooden box, hand-painted, edges worn. I recognized it instantly. It was Emily's, her old jewelry box, the one she'd kept her little treasures in. Paper rings, buttons, seashells she'd collected from the beach when she was 5. I remembered the sound it made when she opened it, that tiny, sweet creak of a hinge that always made her giggle. Lily placed the box on the ground and said softly, "I brought something new for her." She opened the lid, revealing a folded piece of paper inside, a drawing. I could see the colors even from where I stood. Bright blues and yellows, the shape of 3 people standing under a tree. Above it, in Lily's careful handwriting, me, Daddy, and Emily. Daniel's shoulders shook. He tried to speak, but his voice caught. "She'd love it," he whispered. Lily smiled through her tears. "I hope she can see it." Daniel touched her hair, smoothing it back. "She can, sweetheart. She always could." I felt my knees weaken, my heart aching so hard it was almost a physical pain. I remember the day we buried that jewelry box, the way Daniel had to pry it from my hands because I couldn't let go. I thought if I held on to her things, I could hold on to her. But grief doesn't work like that. It waits in the corners of your home, quiet and patient, until one day it spills out through the cracks. I realized then what Daniel had been doing all this time. He and Lily weren't just visiting Emily. They were keeping her alive in the only way they knew how. Through stories, small rituals, secret visits filled with love. They'd built a private world where our little girl still existed, safe from the weight of my pain. My tears blurred the candlelight. I wiped my face and stood, pressing a hand to the cold metal of the fence. The gate was still open just a little. My chest tightened as I took a slow step forward. I didn't want to scare them, but I couldn't stay hidden any longer. The grass brushed against my shoes as I walked closer. I could hear Lily humming, that same tune Emily used to hum before bed. It was fragile and beautiful, like a thread tying past and present together. Daniel turned first. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Anna!" His voice was barely a whisper. Lily gasped. "Mom?" For a moment, none of us spoke. The wind stirred between us, carrying the faint scent of wax and wildflowers. My lips parted, but the words didn't come. I wanted to say so much, that I wasn't angry, that I understood now, that I was sorry for shutting them out. But all that came out was a trembling breath. Daniel stood and reached for my hand. His fingers were cold, rough, and shaking. "We didn't want you to see this," he said softly. "You weren't ready." Tears blurred my vision as I shook my head. "I should have been. I should have come back here with you." My voice cracked. I thought forgetting would make it easier, but it only made it worse. Lily wrapped her arms around me, burying her face against my chest. "We just wanted her to know you still love her," she whispered. I held her tight, my hands trembling as I pressed my cheek against her hair. "I never stopped," I said. "Not for a single day." The 3 of us stood there, bound together by love and loss, the candlelight flickering softly beside Emily's name. The air was cold, but the warmth between us was real, fragile, alive. We stayed until the lantern began to dim and the sky started to pale at the edges. When we finally left, Daniel locked the gate behind us, but this time it didn't feel like closing a door. It felt like opening one. As we walked home, Lily slipped her hand into mine. Daniel walked beside us in silence. The world felt different. Not lighter, but honest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. And for the first time since losing Emily, I could breathe without guilt. That night after we came home, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the faint reflection of the candlelight flickering through the window from the lantern Daniel had left on the porch. My eyes burned, but I couldn't close them. I kept replaying everything. The grave, Emily's name, Lily's tiny drawing of 3 smiling figures under a tree. Me, Daddy, and Emily. For years, I thought my grief was something I could bury. I believed that if I stopped talking about her, stopped remembering her, maybe the pain would fade. But grief doesn't fade. It festers. It waits in the quiet corners of your heart, whispering her name when the house is silent. Now I understood. Daniel hadn't kept this secret to deceive me. He had done it to protect what was left of me. He saw the way I shattered after Emily died, the way I refused to eat, to leave the house, to even look at her room. He saw the version of me that stopped being a wife and a mother, that became only an echo. So he built a small private world of remembrance for the daughter we lost, one that Lily could share while I hid from mine. In that moment, I felt two kinds of heartbreak, the one for my child and the one for the years I'd missed, the nights Daniel and Lily had spent whispering to a memory I was too afraid to face. The next morning, Daniel found me still awake. He paused at the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee, his face pale with exhaustion. There was no pretending now. He set 1 mug down beside me and sat on the bed, silent for a long while. The air between us was thick, not with anger, but with truth. "I wanted to tell you," he said quietly. "So many times, but every time I looked at you, I saw how much it still hurt. And I couldn't make you relive it again." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "You should have," I whispered. "You should have let me hurt, because pretending not to doesn't make it go away." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. I just didn't want to lose you too." For the first time in years, Daniel reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. His touch felt different, heavier but real, honest. We sat there, 2 broken people finally facing the same direction. When Lily padded into the room, her eyes swollen from crying, she climbed between us without a word. We held each other in silence. It was the kind of silence that heals instead of hides. Later that day, we went through Emily's old things together. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten summers, boxes stacked in the corner untouched for years. Daniel handed me one labeled in fading ink, "Emily's Things." Inside were small pieces of her, the pink hairbrush she used to sing into, her tiny sneakers, a crayon drawing of a house with 3 stick figures and a dog. I traced her handwriting with my fingers, remembering the way she used to laugh when she wrote her name too big. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes wide, taking in every memory she'd been too young to remember. "She looked like me," she whispered. "She did," I said, smiling through tears. "Same eyes, same stubborn chin." Daniel chuckled softly, and the same way of getting what she wanted. We laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. It felt strange, like rediscovering air after drowning for too long. The pain didn't leave, but it softened. It became something I could hold without breaking. As evening fell, I found myself standing in Emily's old room. The walls were still painted soft yellow, faded now, but warm. The stuffed bear she used to carry everywhere sat on the dresser, one button eye missing. I picked it up, holding it to my chest, and whispered, "I missed you so much." And in the stillness that followed, I almost swore I heard her laughter echo back, faint, soft, but real. That night, Daniel didn't wait for me to fall asleep. None of us did. We stayed up late talking about Emily, about the years we lost, about the nights they spent at the cemetery. I asked questions I had been too afraid to ask. Lily told me about the drawings she'd made for her sister, how she'd whispered goodnight to her before bed each night. Daniel admitted how he used to drive out there alone before Lily was old enough to go. It wasn't betrayal, it was devotion, love taking the only form it could in the dark. When dawn came, the sky was streaked with pink and gold. I opened the window, letting the cool air rush in. It smelled like wax and wildflowers again, the scent that would forever remind me of Emily's grave. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. "She would have been 17 this year," I said, softly. He nodded, his chin resting on my head. "Yeah. She'd probably be taller than both of us." I smiled, closing my eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe she'd still crawl into bed with us when it rained." Lily's voice piped up from behind. "She probably would have stolen my clothes." We all laughed again, the kind of laugh that carried sadness but also something lighter, gratitude. For the first time, remembering didn't hurt. It healed. I knew then that Emily would never really be gone. As long as we kept her alive in our stories, she'd always be with us. In our laughter, in our whispers, in the way the candlelight flickered against the window each night. And when Daniel reached out to turn off the lamp that night, I caught his hand and said, "Leave it on, I don't need the dark anymore." The morning sun poured through the curtains, golden and too bright, as if the world had decided to move on without me. My body felt heavy, my eyes swollen from crying, but for the first time in years, my heart didn't feel hollow. It hurt, yes, but it was alive. There was something sacred in the ache, something that reminded me that love never disappears, it only changes shape. Daniel was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed with a cup of coffee. The steam curled between us, carrying the smell of roasted beans and quiet mornings. He didn't speak at first, neither did I. There was no need. Everything that could be said had already been whispered in the dark hours between night and dawn. "Are you okay?" he asked finally, his voice low and careful, like he was afraid I might break again. I stared at the light stretching across the floorboards and nodded slowly. "No, but I will be." That was the first honest thing I'd said in years. Daniel smiled, small but real. She'd be happy to hear that. His words hit me like a wave, and suddenly the tears came again, soft this time, not violent. I didn't hide them. I let them fall freely, feeling each one like a prayer. Daniel reached for my hand, and we sat like that for a long time, fingers intertwined, breathing in sync. It felt like a promise, not to forget, but to remember together. When Lily joined us, her hair still tangled from sleep, she climbed onto the bed and rested her head in my lap. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. Her small hand found mine, and for a moment everything was simple again. A mother, a father, a daughter, a memory between us. "Can we go again tonight?" Lily asked quietly. Daniel looked at me. For the first time, he didn't try to answer for me. "Yes," I said. My voice trembled but didn't break. "We'll all go together." Lily smiled, a fragile, grateful smile that made my chest tighten. She leaned closer and whispered, "I think she'll like that." That day, I cleaned the house for hours. It wasn't about the dust or the mess. It was about reclaiming space that had felt dead for too long. I opened the windows, letting the cool breeze fill the rooms, chasing away the stale air of years of silence. I found an old photo of Emily in the drawer, a candid one, her face half lit by sunlight, her mouth open in laughter. I placed it on the living room shelf, right where everyone could see it. Daniel stood behind me, watching quietly. "You sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "She belongs here." He nodded, and I saw tears glimmer in his eyes. It wasn't sadness this time. It was relief. We made lunch together, something simple, something Emily used to love, pancakes with too much syrup and sliced strawberries on top. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and sweet. Lily laughed when Daniel flipped a pancake too high and it nearly hit the ceiling. It felt like a normal day again, the kind we used to have when life didn't hurt so much. But beneath the laughter, I felt the undercurrent of change. We were different now, stronger, softer, rawer. We had looked grief in the eye and decided not to run from it anymore. That evening, we returned to the cemetery. This time there was no hiding, no sneaking. We carried flowers, candles, and the same lantern Daniel always brought. The path felt shorter, the air less cold. The shadows didn't look so menacing now. They looked like they were guiding us home. Lily skipped a little ahead, humming softly. Daniel walked beside me, the lantern swinging gently in his hand. The gate creaked open, and I didn't flinch this time. When we reached Emily's grave, I knelt down and brushed away the leaves that had fallen across her name. The candlelight danced across the stone, making it glow faintly, like it was alive. I placed the new flowers, daisies, her favorite, and whispered, "We're here, sweetheart, all of us." Lily knelt beside me, placing her hand over mine. Daniel stood behind us, his shadow stretching long under the moonlight. For a long time, none of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of love, of memory, of forgiveness. I looked up at the stars scattered across the sky and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. When we returned home, the house no longer felt haunted. The air was warm, alive, carrying traces of wax and flowers. I walked past Emily's photo on the shelf and smiled. The candle by the window flickered softly, casting tiny glimmers on the wall. I sat down beside Daniel and Lily, the three of us wrapped in a blanket. Lily rested her head on my shoulder. Daniel kissed my temple. The warmth between us felt stronger than the years of silence that had nearly destroyed us. And when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear a soft giggle, distant but real, Emily's echoing gently through the walls. I didn't cry this time. I smiled. The next few nights blurred into a soft rhythm of healing. Every evening, as the sun slipped below the horizon, Lily would pull out a small candle from the drawer beside the window. It was never planned, never spoken about. It just became something she did. She would strike a match, light the wick, and whisper, "For her." Then we'd sit together in the golden glow, the flicker dancing on our faces, painting shadows that looked almost like the life we used to have. At first, I thought it was just for Emily, but I soon realized it was for all of us. For Daniel, who had carried his grief quietly for years. For Lily, who had grown up with a sister she only knew through stories. And for me, for the woman who had finally stopped hiding from her pain. Each night, that single flame became our ritual. We didn't need to visit the cemetery every evening anymore. Emily had found her way home. The candle by the window became her place. When it burned, the whole house seemed softer, warmer, like she was somewhere nearby, listening, maybe even laughing. Sometimes Lily would draw while the candle flickered. She made pictures of two girls playing in the garden, one with her hair tied up, one with her hair loose. I never corrected her. I never said that Emily's hair was always in messy pigtails, or that she never liked wearing shoes. I just watched as Lily gave her sister new stories, new memories to live inside. One night, as Daniel and I watched her sketch, he said quietly, "You know, I used to light one of these after you went to bed. I just didn't want you to see." I turned to him. "Why?" He smiled, a sad, weary kind of smile. "Because if you saw me remembering her, you'd remember too, and I was afraid of losing you again." I took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You didn't lose me, Daniel. I just got lost for a while." He nodded, eyes glistening. We all did. We sat there in silence, watching the flame dance. It moved like it was breathing, alive with some invisible rhythm only Emily could hear. The light flickered across Daniel's face, softening the lines time had carved there. For the first time in years, his expression wasn't weighed down by guilt. It was full of something else, acceptance, maybe even peace. Lily started writing letters next, small notes folded into hearts. She'd place them beside the candle, whispering secrets to her sister. "Good night, Em," she'd say before blowing out the flame. Sometimes I'd peek inside the notes later. Most of them said things like, "I miss you," or "We had pancakes again," or "Mom smiled today." Every time I read them, I cried. But they weren't sad tears. They were proof that our house had life again, that love had found a way to stay. Weeks passed, and the candle ritual spread into every part of our home. On rainy nights, Daniel lit one in the kitchen while he cooked. On quiet mornings, I'd light one beside Emily's photo before making coffee. It wasn't superstition. It was a reminder, a promise that we would keep the light burning, no matter how dark things got. Neighbors started to notice the glow from our window at night. One of them, Mrs. Green from across the street, stopped me one morning and said, "I see your little candle every evening. It looks so peaceful. You must be praying." I smiled softly. "Something like that." She nodded knowingly, not pressing further. Some things are too sacred for explanation. One evening, as a storm rolled in, the wind howled through the trees and rain lashed against the glass. The power flickered, and the house went dark. Lily ran to the window in a panic. "The candle, Mom!" she cried. I grabbed the lighter from the counter, and together we shielded the wick from the wind until it caught flame again. The tiny light burned steady despite the storm outside. We sat there on the floor, the three of us, watching it glow. Outside, the thunder raged, but inside, everything was calm. The candlelight reflected in Lily's eyes, and for a second, I saw Emily's reflection there too, bright, fearless, full of life. Daniel whispered, "She's still with us." I nodded, my voice trembling. Always. When the storm finally passed, the candle had burned low, a small pool of wax gathered at its base. Lily fell asleep in my arms, her breathing slow and peaceful. Daniel draped a blanket over us and pressed a kiss to my forehead. The house smelled like rain, wax, and something else. Something that felt like home. We didn't blow the candle out that night. We let it burn down to the wick, its last flicker fading with the dawn. When the light finally died, I didn't feel sadness. I felt gratitude, because for the first time, the darkness didn't scare me anymore. It reminded me of her. And as the first light of morning touched the window, I whispered, "Good night, Emily." Then I closed my eyes and slept peacefully for the first time in years. Months have passed since that first night I followed them. The air in our home feels lighter now, as if someone opened all the windows and let the past drift out with the dust. The silence that once suffocated me has turned into something gentle, an embrace instead of a wound. The candle still burns by the window every evening. Sometimes Lily lights it, sometimes I do. On certain nights, Daniel will quietly take a match, his hand steady, his eyes calm, and say, "For her." It's the only ritual we need now. The flame flickers against the glass, catching the sunset, glowing like a small, steady heartbeat. When I watch that light, I see more than fire. I see everything we lost, and everything we found again. I see Emily smile in the shadows on the wall. I hear her laughter in the soft clink of dishes, in the rhythm of Lily's pencil scratching across her sketchbook, in the deep exhale Daniel makes when he finally sits down after a long day. She's there in all of it, in us. We talk about her freely now. We tell stories around the dinner table, small things that once hurt too much to say aloud. Like how she loved to dunk her cookies in milk until they broke, or how she'd insist on saying grace with her eyes open, claiming that closing them made her feel dizzy. Lily laughs at these stories every time, even though she's heard them all before. And Daniel, he doesn't look away anymore when her name comes up. He smiles. Grief, I've learned, doesn't vanish. It doesn't fade like old paint or disappear like a bad dream. It stays. But it changes. It softens at the edges until it feels less like a chain and more like a thread, something that ties us to what we love instead of trapping us in what we've lost. There are still moments when I find myself standing by the window, staring into the night. Sometimes I think I see a shadow move near the candle, a flicker of a small shape dancing in the reflection, and for a heartbeat, I imagine her there, barefoot, hair messy, her little hands pressed to the glass, smiling at me. I never turn away. I just whisper, "Hi, sweetheart," and the flame always brightens, as if answering. Lily says maybe it's just the draft, that the wind plays with the light. Daniel teases her, calls her the family scientist. But I know better. I know what love can do when it refuses to die. On Emily's birthday this year, we went back to the cemetery together. There were no tears this time, no hollow ache in my chest, just warmth. Lily placed a bouquet of wildflowers at the grave, pink and white, tied with a yellow ribbon. Daniel set down one of his cupcakes, still imperfect, just the way Emily liked them. And I read aloud from her favorite bedtime story. My voice trembled, but not from pain, from gratitude. Afterward, we stayed until the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned gold, then lavender, then that deep indigo that feels like peace. When we stood to leave, Lily slipped her hand into mine and said, "I think she's proud of us." I squeezed her hand gently. I think so too. We walked home together, the lantern swinging between Daniel and me, our shadows long behind us. The path no longer felt haunted. It felt familiar, like retracing steps towards something we'd found instead of lost. Now, every night before I sleep, I still hear Daniel whisper, "Good night, sweetheart." But it sounds different. It's not a ritual of waiting or hiding anymore. It's peace. It's love finding its rhythm again. And when the candle flickers by the window, I whisper my own goodnight, not just to Emily, but to the version of myself that was too afraid to remember. The woman who thought forgetting was the same as healing. Because I know now that memory is its own kind of light. Sometimes it flickers, sometimes it fades, but it never truly goes out. So when the flame wavers against the dark, I smile and whisper softly, "Good night, my girls, both of you." And in that glow, fragile, eternal, I finally feel whole.